She did all right.
Still on.
Yeah.
Also, we can use our time, there's probably a lot to say and to hear today. Shall we get started officially? Sure. All right.
I think we should start with Jay.
Prayer. Sure. With a prayer?
Yeah, I'll do a prayer. Lord be with you.
Nothing else to do with it.
We thank you, dear God, for this Advent season as we await your coming and for the foretaste of that with the pageant today. We ask, oh God, that you be with us and grant us your peace, grant us your joy, your love, and your hope, and help us to be a people, a Christmas people, to know your love and to share your love and to sing joyfully the music of the angels. In Christ we pray. Amen.
Because of the time of the year, we thought, well, something Dickensian, his most famous book. Well, we only have barely an hour. So besides Christmas's present and yet to come, we could just share our personal stories of our Christmases past. And this was Alan's idea. Anything else we should set it up with?
Yeah, I just think there's so much we can share today. Starting with, let me ask you and share what parts of this you would like to share. What is your first earliest memories of Christmas? When you were a kid, what was it like to be a kid?
I will start.
Okay,
When I was real little, we lived in Laramie, Wyoming. And my grandmother lived in Columbus, Ohio, where my dad grew up. We would travel by the Pacific Railroad train from Laramie to Chicago and from Chicago to Columbus. And we would enjoy the dining cars and dump carts. And I was like, it made a real impression on me at that age. And then when we got to Columbus, my grandparents with their neighbors started a caroling group where they were singing around the neighborhood. And fast forward several decades later, my parents, when we moved to Columbus, would take us to one of the sons of the original caroler group, and we would have caroling there.
wow. That's quite a treat. So you went almost every year to Columbus when you were young?
Wow.
By train?
Were there decorations in the train for the?
No, but I remember my dad put his shoes in a little compartment. And in the morning, he would open up the compartment and the shoes would be so brightly shiny. It's like magic.
Santa Claus.
Good olden days.
Olden days, I would hope, I'm picturing there's an idyllic postcard scene of a nice Amtrak train through the prairies with snow everywhere. When it used to snow in December.
Out west.
That was then.
Yes.
Why don't we get JS go next?
Yes, JS?
Well, one of my earliest Christmas memories was of the pageant.
Wow.
And the pageant was magical for me back then. For those of us who were at WCC during that time, I'm looking at you, Betty. It was held at 5 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, and it was packed, even though we had all been at church in the morning. And the focus was on holding that reverent, silent, reverent energy. And there was the kings and the shepherds that would process down the aisles up to the baby Jesus. And there were 18 teenage girls that played angels.
Wow.
And they would accompany the people that would come up the aisles who were coming to visit the baby Jesus. And there were 2 first graders who were cherubs that knelt next to the manger. And I got to be a cherub in 1961. But my earliest memories were sitting in the pews watching the pageant. And what my earliest participation was being able to carry a present up to the manger. They got all of the 3 and 4-year-olds, gave them a gift box and had them walk up the aisles to give presents to the baby Jesus.
I assume you were a clothed cherub.
A what?
A clothed cherub, Winnetka style.
Oh, yes, of course. I have a picture of me somewhere. I'll try and find it if I can later.
That's a very appropriate and wonderful memory for today.
Somebody else, what were?
I have sort of one related, sort of, I grew up like, I was thinking about what Tom was saying. I grew up in the country. My parents had a house on a lake and it was way back and we had lots and lots and lots of snow. And I just remember
Where
being
was this?
in Michigan.
Okay.
And a little on a lake in Michigan and just south of Grand Rapids. And it was very quiet. We had lots and lots of snow and beautiful blue skies. And the lake was always frozen. And my dad, that during the holidays, we would be home. He would go out and clean off a spot of ice. He'd test the ice and clean off the spot of ice so we could go ice skating. And we had a fireplace and a Christmas tree, but I especially remember the Christmas tree with a bubbling light. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But the best part of this is I went to a one-room schoolhouse.
Oh.
And they were, when I started, there were kindergarten through 8th grade with one teacher.
Oh, my goodness.
Wow.
And we had a Christmas pageant at the school.
Oh.
At the school.
Wow.
And I was probably, I don't know, 6 or 7. And my younger sister was about 4. And we knew all the kids up there were playing all the different parts. And my sister got away from my mother. And my sister wandered around and then she finally got up on the stage, looked in the creche and looked at the audience and said, "It's not a real baby."
I have one that kind of goes along with JS. David was probably 3 and I was in the choir. So he and Tom got there late and sat in the back of the the congregation for the pageant. And when the children went up to put the boxes around the manger, they had them all sitting in the front row so that they could do it quickly and come back to their seats. Well, they had one package left over and they saw David there in the back row at age 3. And they said, "Would you like to take this up to the manger?" Well, he said later that he thought it was a train and he didn't want to break it. So he went so slowly up the whole aisle. Finally, they gave up upstairs and put the spotlight on him. And as everyone watched him appear, and I was in the choir on the end and seeing my little kid coming up there with, this precious gift. I was practically in tears. Remember, he had on a little short pant, little outfit or whatever it was. But I always remember that because, I mean, he was so serious and he just didn't want to hurt what was in the package. But then later, when the same little kid was older, in fact, younger, I guess, because it was the December when he was born. And the choir was up there, the adult choir, and I was supposed to sing the O Holy Night, and uh, looking at the manger from the choir, all of a sudden my milk came in and soaked the whole front of my robe as I stood up to sing with my book so that maybe no one would notice. That was kind of an embarrassing memory.
Betty, if it was a black or dark blue robe, that's why they're dark, they don't.
Oh dear.
Betty singing "Oh Holy Night" was a very special part of the service when I was younger.
Yeah, I remember Betty singing "Oh Holy Night"
I remember that.
every
too.
Christmas, yeah.
And they still have someone sing it, which is perfect, you know? Carry on the tradition.
Well, Betty, I know you were the soprano soloist, I think, for 50 years,
Mhm.
from the time you were 18. So you did it many times.
Nancy,
It's funny because we did get paid. It started at $7.15 a service, and then, of course, did go up. But the church always put into Social Security for me every month or week or whatever it was. And if you're a teacher in Illinois, you don't get Social Security. You get your pension from the Illinois Retired Teachers Association. And if you want Social Security, you have to wait until you retire and then put in 40 quarters of work other than teaching in order to get your Social Security or your Medicare, I guess it is, or whatever. Because you didn't get your Social Security, you got based on, you know. But it's interesting because some teachers decided to not do the 40 quarters, but I already had them because I'd been singing every month, not getting paid for the teaching, but it was music. So I was one of the fortunate people who didn't have to go back to work selling stuff in the grocery store or whatever.
wow.
Yeah, I think we should hear from Jeffrey before he flies out to the
Well,
sanctuary.
Nancy, I think Nancy, I'm in no hurry. Nancy, you've been waiting a long time.
Well, I was gonna talk about Milwaukee and the Warriors, well, I will. So Christmas that was the time when coal was delivered by horse wagon for the furnace and the milk, et cetera. Garbage was all, horse-drawn wagons. And, we lived in a flat on Bradford Avenue next to the Milwaukee River. And I received a bicycle, my first, that kind. And my father it was a used bike and my dad had painted it. And my eye caught that right away at whatever age I was. And I was so disappointed I didn't have a new bike. It was a painted old bike. But that Christmas there was no snow, it was raining and I remember the puddles. And I got on that bike and I was so thrilled. And that was a Christmas, must have been 1944 or something. I was old enough to pedal.
Wow.
And I was like 7 blocks away.
Were
Oh,
you?
really? Yeah.
Well, we were always meant to be friends.
I remember my earliest Christmas, there was a blend, it probably could even have been the same year. But I was 4 or 5. This is the early 1930s, part of the Depression. It's Concordia Lutheran Church, Christmas Eve or Christmas pageant time. And Mother is at the piano in the front. And she has put me on an old splintered chair. It's funny how you remember the splinters, old wooden chair. Put me there for me to sing "Under the Stars, One Holy Night." One of these pieces that goes about an octave and a half. I still have it at home, never used it since, and nor has any of my students. Maybe because of the memory. Anyhow, the congregation or Christmas feast is taken, and that I'm standing there waiting for mother to begin. There's a ripple of laughter all over the congregation. Well, wouldn't you get off the chair? I certainly did, because I thought they were laughing at me. That's when you were in the show with them, mother picked up, be back in the chair. And I sang the song. We found out later that was my sister who began her theatrical career with in the back row, sitting with my father. She's 2.5 years younger. That's stereophonically. And then at 5 o'clock in the morning, having recovered from all that, all the Swedes go to Julita. That's right. And father had, the wood craftsman on the church, had created tall candle holders which were fastened on alternate pews all down the aisle. So candles were burning, candles in the window, and 6 Christmas trees. Remember angel hair?
Oh, yes.
Blue lights and candles and halos of angel hair all over the front of the church. And for Elsa and the Swedes crying. This is the 30s. Some were immigrants, you know, in recent memories. And from when Christmas morn is dawning with me on the chair to that, what a contrast, and all the same night. It's a merger of all kinds of feelings I've never forgotten. Those haloed blue lights and the candles, just gorgeous. And this Christmas Day, I will be back at Concordia on the morning services. They continue full Augustana Lutheran liturgy. Love it.
John, you had your hand up?
Yes, as all you guys know, I'm a preacher's kid, and so I've been going to church as long as my father has taken me there. After I was able to walk, so I have some memories of those events, but I can't bring them up to date exactly. But what I can remember is only a few years ago. Well, several years ago, but not as many. When Carol and I were the people on the at church in this in the
Pageant with Mary and Joseph.
Yeah, a pageant, Mary and Joseph. And wouldn't you know, here's Paul, who's now a physician in Boston. And I wouldn't be able to hold him now, but he was born while we were here. And so Carol and I were Mary and Joseph, and we carried this little baby Jesus
Oh, my house.
up to the
Cradle.
cradle. And so then when we moved back forward, and wouldn't you know, there was a little girl, about 3 rows back in the audience, who noticed what was going on, and she called baby Paul Jesus for several weeks.
No, several years after that, he really thought he was the baby Jesus.
Years old.
Well, we always had real babies. But he was a big one. He was probably about 9 months old at that.
We have kind of a big baby Jesus,
Right?
Nina, what memories do you have
from Milwaukee.
Oh, it wasn't in Big Michael.
Nina, do you have any memories from Milwaukee?
Pardon?
I was asking Nina if she had any memories from Milwaukee. And she was a neighbor.
We lived across the street from my grandparents and they had 10-foot ceilings in their house, I think, just a Victorian house. And so the tree always had to be cut off a little bit for the 10-foot ceilings there. But my grandfather had a string of lights at the bottom of the tree that were regular light bulbs. Unbelievable. Anyway, I have happy memories about times with my grandparents.
I have one. Kai and I grew up in a farming community, and so the church was very central to the community's life. And Christmas was a big deal. So Sunday morning you go for a Christmas service and greet everyone, and everybody talks to each other. And Harry Philman had cuts on his hand. And I was little, I was maybe 5. And I felt so badly for him that on Christmas he'd have hurt fingers. So fast forward to that evening, the community always caroled around to each of the farms and would have hot cocoa. And one year Santa showed up. Well, there were 7 children in our family. We were just ecstatic. And I'm sitting on Santa's lap, talking to him.
Oh, the fingers.
He's got his, he's got the same bandages as Harry Philman. What? No, you're Philman or Santa. It was exciting to be able to know that Santa wasn't real, but it was also like, oh, yeah, that part's over.
Well, you gotta hear from Jeffrey, what happened in Decatur as a child, when you were a child?
It was a very full month. I mean, everything was Christmas. Scouts was Christmas, church was Christmas, home was Christmas, shopping was Christmas. It was very full. What comes to mind is my dad's contribution. He had a very small but specific contribution. He gave each of us $10. That was, which, and when you're little, you know, that's a lot, especially like 1966. Yeah, so that was significant, but otherwise, he was just kind of there. He was very present, but most things were in the hands of mother. The memory that comes to mind most recently is one Vince and I share. And as a pastor, I often had a 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock PM service on Christmas Eve. And there are some adventures from those services. One is when we were raising our grandson, you know, we had to take him along with us to the late service. And he was really little, and so he came, we put him in his pajamas and brought a blanket and a pillow and just found a pew. For him, and he just slept there. Another year, there was one family in our church, they really only came to church on Christmas Eve. You have a lot of people like that. And they were not in church, particularly Christmas Eve, and I thought, something's wrong. And I actually knew that the father was pretty critically ill. Well, they called me, I think, right before the late service, or between the 2 services. I think we had like a 7 o'clock and an 11 at that church. They called me at some point, anyway, late on Christmas Eve, and they told me that he was dying. And he was at Stroger Hospital, Cook County Hospital downtown. So after the late service, Vince and I went down to Stroger. Wow. And he had just passed, so I was with the family, and it was, you know, it was just poignant because of the occasion and how much that family loved the church on Christmas Eve. And that they couldn't be there, but I could be there. Vince and I, actually, Vince was part of that visit. So it was very significant to the family that we brought Christmas Eve to them at that tender time of the father's passing.
Beautiful story. Well, Vince, I know you grew up in Chicago like I did, didn't you?
Yep. Vince is older though, so it's.
No.
His memories go way back.
Wait till you hear my story.
So what was Mary like? I wanna know what she looked like.
Well, Vince, you're.
I'm on stage.
Yes.
Well, I grew up in Chicago and we lived in apartments, so I always wondered how Santa would come, because we didn't have a chimney or a fireplace or anything like that, so. So my mom would always make up these stories, about, how he would come, and we always got the gifts, but, and we would always try to stay up late to see, because we wanted to see Santa, come, and we could never stay up. But there was, on WGN, they would have like this Santa, tracking. And we
Oh,
would
yeah.
watch
Oh,
that
yeah.
on the TV, and I would always try to stay up, and then, it's getting closer and closer, and then I never did stay up until, but I would fall asleep, and then I would just, then all of a sudden Santa would come and all the gifts were there, but it was like, I was always trying to stay up late, to see Santa, I never could, so.
I have to play, remember, don't you?
Yeah.
Piggyback on that, because I was gonna talk about something else, which of course I will talk about. But, I also grew up in a flat too. I grew up in a four-room, a lovely four-room, spacious apartment in Chicago, in Rogers Park. And I remember when I was about 5 years old, we had a very small family. There were about 6 or 7 of us. That's my aunt who lived 3 doors down. And my mother said, "I hear bells." And we rushed into the kitchen and to the back porches, and we heard sleigh bells. And my mother said, "Santa's here, let's run to the living room." So we went to the living room, and lo and behold, there was a dollhouse and all sorts of wonderful gifts. And it was a neighbor who was ringing the bells upstairs, but I really thought Santa was. It's my story about growing up in Chicago. As you know, I grew up in Rogers Park at the farthest north, grammar school, Gale School. And that was just right across from Good News, Good News. Anyhow, our gym looked down in that building. And every school in Chicago, every single grammar school and every single room had a piano. So every child in Chicago, and there must have been, a couple 100,000, every single child learned to sing Christmas carols. And I, coming from a rather unchurched family at that time, learned to sing Christmas carols. And we all, from kindergarten up, well, maybe to 3rd or 4th grade, we all made Christmas gifts in school. There were 700 children in my school. And so that was my Christmas, but then it was carried on in high school, because in our high school choir, the girls' choir, and our high school is 82% Jewish. But most of our choir, of course, was Jewish. But at Christmas time, all the girls would wear a circlet of tinsel, of silver tinsel in their hair, and carry a candle and carol through the halls of the high school. And we never sang any Hanukkah songs. We didn't even know about Hanukkah really, but maybe even towards high school. But when we have reunions, or when I talk to my high school friends, and I have a lot of Jewish high school friends, they tell me that one of the sweetest and most beautiful thing they remember about high school was caroling, singing Christmas carols through the halls of Sullivan High School.
That's very interesting.
It was a lovely life.
Well, I grew up in a small town, of course, North Mississippi, and my dad was, the county seat was where we lived, so we had people coming off of a pretty highly populated countryside, so. And starting in about October, toys would start coming in, and Dad would go, because he was the only toy store in town really at the time. And everyone bought their toys for my dad. We went up to Memphis once to Happy House, the wholesaler and toy seller, retailer. And he was the Saturday morning show, the clown, he dressed as the clown and I got to meet him. And I was so waiting to see him in character, but he wasn't in character, he was himself. And he was a chain smoking. And I was so heartbroken. And I remember one year, Dad went out to Happy House. He bought his toys from several places. He bought a lot from Happy House. And they said, hey, the big thing this year is gonna be Cabbage Patch dolls. Did I
Oh,
mention
yeah.
that? So sure. But Dad just kind of took the dice and rolled them, man. I mean, he just filled up with Cabbage Patch dolls, because you could really get stuck with things. So he sold those Cabbage Patch dolls. Happy Howell ran out of Memphis. It was such a hot item. People drove from Memphis, and when Dad would get to the store at 8 in the morning, there would be people lined up to get what few Cabbage Patch dolls he had left. And I joked that I think I went to college on Cabbage Patch dolls. But it was quite something, because I always felt like even when I was young, I'd come help out. I was one of Santa's old elves helping supply all the toys and for the kids. And I remember having, one year Dad set the Western Auto record for most bicycles sold. And I had to assemble with my brother and one of Dad's employees, all those bicycles. There were bicycles everywhere in the basement of Mississippi in the county back. So, and Dad would always come home on Christmas Eve, and when I was older in high school, I'd work too. I would, we'd all try to guess how much that day's sales had been. And I almost always got it closest. You know, I could just tell it's a good year.
What town was it?
Excuse me?
What town? What?
Batesville, Mississippi. If you go down 55 from here, you would eventually, it would be a long way to go, but you would eventually get to Batesville. And you go down from Memphis, it's about 50 miles south of Memphis. If you go east from there, and about 20-25 minutes, you're in Oxford, where the university is. So it was a well-located and had some factories, especially when I was young.
Isn't the clown on the Simpsons also a chain smoker?
Yeah, I think he's actually based on Happy Al.
Is it?
Simpsons. Oh, God.
Julia, I know you're in California. So
Yes,
how do
I
they
grew up in
celebrate out there?
California, so we didn't have snow, which is just fine.
Tell us a manner Easter. Where are you from? San,
What?
What town?
go ahead. What
Monterey,
town?
California.
Monterey.
And, my memory that I thought I would tell is when I was about 6 years old, I told my mother, I don't believe in Santa Claus. I don't know how he could come down the chimney. He's too fat. And my mother said, you're right. But it was a wonderful story. And Santa Claus meant love and gifts and friendship. And so that was wonderful. And would I help stuff the stockings for my two younger brothers? So I did. So that was.
Wow.
She was prepared.
Yeah.
I think so. She sort of knew that I was.
Wow.
Wait,
And then
so
you would-
this is the scientific thing here. We can keep getting that.
So you've been a realist ever since, haven't you?
Hmm?
Realist ever since.
Thanks.
I think it's pretty usual for the oldest child to begin to
Yeah.
participate in Santa for the younger. You know, it's like of a coming of age when you're old enough not to believe, and then to become Santa as soon as you really express the fact that you don't believe. It's kind of great.
Wasn't Kai going to, you were going to say something? Right, Kyle?
What was going through my mind was as the 7 children got to be of age and had families of their own, it seemed like a lot of money was being spent on stuff. And so one Christmas, we decided that everyone would pitch their own charity or project that they were involved in. And then everyone would contribute to that project and they'd have the prize for the. But so the kids also were pitching, you know, trying to convince people and tell people about what they were concerned about.
We spent more on that Christmas than any Christmas year.
Yeah.
Tripping into your charity and the last one charity too.
We haven't heard of any doubting though.
Yeah.
Adams.
Well, one of my early memories actually kind of comes right up to today, was going to my aunts and uncles and, celebrating. I had no cousins with that aunt and uncle, I had no children, but my aunt by marriage had a sister and her family would come and I played the flute as a child. Through high school and then stopped, but, we played with my aunt and uncle who were very good flutists, and it was my cousin, not cousin, but cousin by marriage and I. And I, maybe 10 years ago, inherited, because I was the oldest niece and nephew of their clan, inherited my uncle's flute, and it was a very nice flute, and I had Richard Graff, who played the flute at our church for many years, help me find somebody to repair the flute. And then just like 3 weeks ago, when Mary played the flute, we had been 2 nights before to a Northwestern concert where I was looking at the flutes and thinking about this flute that had been repaired and never played. And I asked Mary if she would consider giving me lessons. So I'm gonna start flute lessons with Mary. That's my story.
That's great.
What about you, Chuck?
So you can play those and then.
Well, I guess I have several, as Jean said, she had a strong tradition of gathering with her parents and her uncle, Christmas time, and then when we were married, we continued that tradition. We'd drive down from Boston to their home in northern New Jersey, and we would gather around the Christmas tree to assemble toys. You remember when you get toys and some.
You don't speak about this.
So
Yeah.
James' uncle, who's a very accomplished scientist, he actually helped discover warfarin, which is.
Oh,
wow. Discover what?
Warfarin.
At Wisconsin?
Which is a
At
blood thinner.
Wisconsin.
Yeah, right.
But actually, anyway, it's warfarin is a Wisconsin alumni.
Research Foundation.
Research Foundation.
Foundation, right. Anyway, so he wasn't particularly, facile with his hands, he wasn't really adept at doing anything, and I remember we were assembling a tricycle, was it a small?
Like a big wheel.
And he got the, you know, you have these caps you put on the end of the axle to hold the wheel on, well, he put that on before the wheel went on.
Yeah. You can't get it off.
But that, we had a lot of fun, we got a lot of laughs. I'm assembling toys before Santa arrived, which was always a lot of fun.
Oh, that's cute.
I remember being up until about 2 or 3 in the morning, wrapping gifts, especially when Paul was young, because it was so many things, and I would be exhausted the next day. Yeah.
Does anybody remember the smell of lutefisk?
Oh.
No, only you and John, would even acknowledge that.
Every Christmas Eve, very briefly, the bouquet of lutefisk, his mother was boiling the soap out of the cod.
Oh, yeah.
This is how it happens. Because the grandparents were not happy unless there was lutefisk, and we ate and then had gifts and the whole shebang on Christmas Eve before we went to the 11 o'clock service. And the rest of us sane folks had chicken. The mother had 2 full meals to prepare. And in those days, nobody brought. The lady at the house did it all.
Oh, dear.
At least in our tradition.
Yeah.
And then in the morning, there was 5 a.m. You just always have already described. And then the grandparents lived at the other end of the block at Concordia on Celia Avenue. And so there's where we collapsed until the 10:30 a.m. service on Christmas Day. So that was my parents dealing with 2 full meals, all the Christmas being handed out, the relatives finally getting out the door in time for the 11 o'clock service, and then hanging out with grandparents for 5 o'clock and 10:30. Christmas Day, I remember my sister and I being told to be quiet because the parents were sleeping. That was Christmas Day. It never has appealed to me.
Let me ask you another question. Christmas dinner for me, not for what the ideal Christmas dinner should be. Christmas dinner would not be Christmas dinner unless we had complete that sentence. What would be the dish you most look forward to at Christmas Day? Or whatever, Christmas Eve.
Was it Lucas?
You look forward to Lucas.
There it is.
You
can't see it.
That's really interesting.
So you had Litfist?
No, I'm just saying, I was at sweet, that's John's sweet.
Oh,
Yeah, what would
That would be at the bottom
what would be
of our
the dish you most like for this?
Well, let's start with you.
You always have plum pudding with a highly alcoholic sugar sauce on it.
Oh.
And my grandfather's father was a teetotaler. And he had some of the plum pudding. And usually mother made a special sauce for him, but that didn't work out one day. And so he ate it and then, would you like some more pudding? No, I don't think so, but I would like a little more of that delicious sauce.
You know, it's interesting you said that, because I would say there are two foods I like, but my dad's mom they owned the grocery store, and she had a massive garden she maintained till her 80s. She had a vegetable for all 6 grandkids that she cooked. Everyone had their favorite vegetable, they
Oh,
were
my
different.
goodness.
So mine was creamed corn, fresh cream. I still to this day love making my own. No one in the family likes it. So I'll make some on the cob for them, but I will cream it and put a little butter in it, but I don't put much butter in mine because didn't need it. And, but I always loved that. But she used to make the best fruitcake. I know people don't like fruitcake. I love fruitcake.
I love fruitcake too.
So, and she would make this fruitcake, and I probably started drinking at a very early age because she could coat it in a rum towel.
Okay.
I would taste the rum, and then this day I love rum. I love rum. So she would make rolls. That you would smell all the yeast rolls, you could smell them all the house. And
Yes.
you would put a little bit of butter on it maybe, and even without the butter, they just melt in your mouth. And my aunt took up that recipe and she never could quite pull it off like my grandmother could. And I wish to this day we had it, not that any of us could achieve it.
Say
That's
again
true.
the name of the goodie.
My mom did
Yeast rolls.
leaf lard pie crust, and so I remember the mincemeat pie. Leaf lard is from the pig's, the outside of the pig is, stomach is surrounded by this white fat. You can just eat the fat, it's so wonderful. So in those days, you'd buy leaf lard at the butcher. And my mother was a French cook kind of person, which really meant she was a farm cook, everything was fresh. I never had a can of anything.
My mother too.
Yeah,
My mother made her own mincemeat too.
oh, she did.
Oh, wow.
I remember making her own mincemeat, but she also made homemade cinnamon rolls that were.
All those homemade things.
Cardamom coffee cake, there's a
Well,
sweet.
that's a good thing, yeah.
You were never without it.
Yeah.
And limpa bread, don't forget the limpa bread.
Oh, the lymph bread.
Okay, my grandmother's limpa bread, my niece tried to approximate, it, never did. But from childhood, I remember the bouquet of limpa bread, and Tagg's Bakery in Evanston gets sold out of limpa bread because with the Holly Fair until and COVID didn't cut it out. Covenant Village would buy out Tagg's limpa bread and cardamom coffee, so you had to come to our place for our Holly Fair to get all of that. Because we loved the Swedes up at Covenant Village. And that's where you get your limpa bread and your cardamom coffee cake.
Lymph bread right out of the oven with butter.
Oh.
What I remember from the 1940s though is chocolate chocolates with liqueurs in them were very popular. People used to give them to each other. And my parents loved them and, you know, they loved them and I got to love them too. And I think I love, and I was very little. And I think to this day, I love liqueurs because of that.
Right.
How about Betty and JS? Do you have,
Yeah. JS, anybody else?
Are they hearing?
Betty, you're muted.
I'm muted.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
It doesn't have a red line in it.
What's your favorite Christmas food?
Oh. Cranberry sauce, like cranberry sauce. Interesting, because when I grew up, we always had a special table for the children where we had root beer. And it was always in red glasses. And I always remembered that because it was the only time we ever saw these glasses. And the root beer was good. But I was telling our memoirs class about that one time, and one of the ladies said, oh, she said, I have those red glasses at home. And she brought one for Ben. So it's in the cupboard at their house. Every time we have Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner, he always has the red glass there at his place and has root beer in it. Even though he wasn't even a twinkle in my eye at that point.
And JS, what's your favorite memory of a special food for Christmas?
Food. My family hosted Christmas dinner. And my mother was legendary for being a really bad cook. So my memories of Christmas dinner revolve around telling the guests which foods to avoid at all costs.
They give to the.
I want to leave you guys with one more question. I'm gonna have to go, but I discuss it, we take a little bit of extra time if you need it, but for you, what's the most meaningful, what does Christmas really mean for you? What part of the message of Christmas is said is most important? Maybe one or two of you share that.
My concern is about what's happening right now in Israel in this Christmas season, Bethlehem and so on. With all this fighting going on, you can't go to celebrate the birth of Jesus in the Bethlehem area.
So the message of peace. Somebody else, what is most important part of the message?
I think that's an important thing. John, you're right on.
But I think the other part of that is hope, the light shining in the darkness.
Yeah.
We have to hold on to that. We really have to hold on to that. And love.
And these holidays, Hanukkah, Christmas,
Right.
Kwanzaa, they all center around the winter solstice, which is the beginning of, which I think there's a reason for that, these holidays at this time. Because the winter solstice is the beginning of greater light each day after the 21st.
So I'm gonna go, but
Yes.
you guys can keep discussing, and next 2 weeks, we have quite an agenda for January. You'll be looking on the web about the programs that are coming up, and and hope to see everyone, and I hope you come, I hope someone's there preaching Sunday morning next week. If anyone comes, I'll share you, the first story I'm gonna share is a story about my own church.
Oh,
Out
good.
there.
Yeah.
So we're having we are having two.
Two services,
I think-
usual, then at 4 o'clock.
I think you've started a new tradition. I think this is a lovely way to end the year before Christmas.
Right.
And to share it, because I learned so much about everybody's background and about them, and I think that's what holds us together to a large extent.
So, good to see everyone.
Merry
Thank
Christmas.
you, Alan, thank you. Junia, did you have a Christmas tree? In Monterey?
Yes, we would go into the woods, because I lived in the woods, we would chop down the trees.
Oh.
And what kind of a tree was that, Junior?
Pine trees.
Pine trees.
Yeah.
And here I lived in Denver. Scads of people went into the woods. And I cut down my tree and shipped it in a piano box back to Chicago.
Oh my gosh.
5 feet high. And it was like state in Madison on Christmas Eve. Everybody in Denver was up in the woods and the car, you know, the narrow road, all the cars parked. How they got out of there, I don't know, but I did. And found a tree and cut it down and brought it back to Denver, found the piano box, put it in, shipped it back to Chicago. And it sat on the side of our lawn.
Were these on federal lands?
This was in 1957. So whatever, but everybody did that, it's certainly okay. It's fun.
In Wisconsin, they thin out some of the trees in the state parks and then leave them at the side of the road.
Oh,
really?
Yeah, I
Then you
mean,
pick them up.
yeah, I mean, they
Right.
do it for the good of the woods.
Right.
But at Christmas time, there's always somebody to
Is
pick
that
up.
still the case?
Pardon?
Still now?
I don't know,
No, I kind of
a
imagine.
generation ago, probably.